Come with us on a journey into the unknown, the unexplained, and the unbelievable. We will test your senses and challenge your beliefs. A world where science and religion clash. Or do they? You will meet real people and hear real stories, but you will not believe. You will witness strange sights and hear strange sounds, but you will not believe. This is the New England Ghost Project. Welcome to the nightmare.
Hello.
Yes, good evening, and welcome to another Masterpiece Theater with TMX12 and what's the other one they have? Do you ever see that one? Mystery Science Theater. Mystery Science Theater.
No idea.
I am that guy, and she's the blonde Bombshell, and you're listening to Ghost Chronicles Next Generation right here on TogiNet, Pararex, and East Bridgewater's TV.
East Bridgewater Community Television.
Right. So we got an awesome show today, really.
God, I hope so.
Really. And, you know, it's not easy putting one of these shows together, and so I really, you know, take this time to thank everybody who worked so hard and diligently to make this happen. So
absolutely.
I do appreciate it.
Thank you very much to all our crew for
Right.
getting us on the air.
So anyways, we got a good show today because we flew in someone all the way from the UK.
I know.
Isn't that exciting?
Yeah, but shh, don't say yet.
Oh, I didn't.
Don't say.
No, I haven't. So what do we got? Surprise for me.
A surprise?
Yeah. Don't you have a little surprise for me, like you always do? Like a cemetery trip?
That's never a surprise.
Of course it is.
That's expected.
Yeah, but I never know what it's going to be.
How long have we been doing this show?
But I never know what it's going to be, and I'm so excited. I always come in waiting with bated breath and saying, I wonder what Anne's going to be doing in her cemetery tripping thingy.
No, he doesn't.
I always do.
No,
all
he
the time.
doesn't. No, he doesn't. Well, we do have a cemetery tripping this evening, and we just finished up a weekend of Spirit Quest up in Groveland, Mass, which was lots of fun, very informative, lots of nice people, made some new friends, met some old friends, and also had some time to do a little cemetery therapy. And
you did?
I did. I snuck out.
When did you do that?
I snuck out. You didn't even know I was gone.
You little creep.
I snuck out.
Left me behind with all those animals.
Saturday night, we had a little downtime before dinner, so I had seen one earlier in the day when I was coming in.
And you just didn't ask me?
No. You weren't too stressed out. He gets a little stressed out. So anyways.
You're the best.
This is a great cemetery that I found up in Georgetown. So if we can go to cemetery tripping right now, enjoy. Welcome to Cemetery Tripping, where I will feature a different cemetery in each episode that I hope you will seek out and enjoy as much as I do. As an avid taphophile, or lover of tombstones, I spend a lot of time in the local New England area in the beautiful and historic cemeteries we have here. The stones here are like no others, and I have literally thousands of pictures of the intricate and symbolic carvings found on them. You can see my pictures on Facebook by doing a search for Cemetery Tripping. Today we are visiting Union Cemetery in Georgetown, Mass., which is right down the road from Groveland, where we held this year's Spirit Quest. Georgetown was first settled in 1639 and was officially incorporated into a town in 1828. In 1675, settlers of the town became involved in King Philip's War. A militia was raised under Captain Samuel Brocklebank, Captain Wadsworth of Milton, and Lieutenant Sharp of Brookline. They met in war on April 21st, 1676 in Sudbury, Mass., and the local militia suffered many losses. An obelisk stands in Sudbury Cemetery, dedicated to the memory of those who died in that battle. The oldest graves in this cemetery are located just inside the wrought iron fence. I found one of the very first people buried in the cemetery almost immediately, Joseph Nelson's wife, Hannah, who died on June 5, 1732 at age 48. Hannah Nelson was the granddaughter of war hero Captain Samuel Brocklebank. It even reads in Hannah's epitaph that her grandfather was slain by Indians on April 21, 1676. Captain Brocklebank is buried in Wadsworth Cemetery in Sudbury, Mass. Another Brocklebank relative, Job, is buried here, and his epitaph reads, "A Soldier of the Revolution." The next oldest stone in Union Cemetery is the grave of Reverend James Chandler, the first pastor of Rowley West Parish Church, who died in 1789 at age 83. It is marked with a large tablestone which has a lengthy epitaph, which is in amazingly good condition considering it has laid flat for more than 200 years. The graves of Abigail Merrill and her daughter Lois caught my eye due to their beautiful cursive script, which I don't see very often. The sole effigy on Lois's grave is stunning, as is the traditional death's head on Abigail's stone. There were many different examples of willows in this burial ground, as well as some of the largest death's heads I have ever seen, carved in a style that I have been told is called cabbage heads or pumpkin heads due to their size. There are many members of the Spofford family buried here, with another gorgeous soul effigy on the grave of Elizabeth Spofford, who died in 1777 in her 29th year. Open areas near the front of the cemetery are believed to contain the unmarked graves of the many child victims of the throat distemper epidemic of 1736, which killed 48 children. It is also believed that slaves are buried in unmarked graves along the edges of the cemetery's oldest sections. If you are ever in historic Georgetown, check out this cemetery, as well as the Samuel Brocklebank Museum just down the street. Perhaps you can do this when you come to next year's Spirit Quest. See you then.
Wow, there you go.
There you have it.
See what I missed?
It was funny because when I was in the cemetery and I came across that first stone of the granddaughter of Samuel oh, now I forgot his name. Brocklebank.
Whatever.
And I had to actually, I'm trying to dust off the stone. I'm like, what does it say? Brocklebank. So anyways, he's the local war hero. So that was a little interesting bit of folklore that I stumbled across. But at any rate,
Excellent.
are we going to introduce our guest this
What you
evening?
doing? You're doing so good today.
Oh, he just wants to sit here and eat popcorn.
You're the best.
Nate brought him popcorn again, so now he's just going to sit and eat popcorn. So
I'm happy.
Well, all right, I will introduce our guest, fine. Our guest this evening is a visitor from England, and I'd like to introduce Mr. Steve Parsons.
Yay!
Hi, good evening.
Thank you for
There
coming.
you
Thank
go.
you for being
Where's
here.
my popcorn? Oh no, wait, Ron's eaten it, hasn't he?
No popcorn, sorry.
Oh, well. What? Oh, my turn?
It's your turn.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Actually,
not going to do all the work.
Okay, well, you're doing so fine, and I'm really laid back. I mean, Spirit Quest was awesome, but it really
He's still
warmed me up.
exhausted.
I think it's really cool sitting here in the churchyard.
Yeah. So anyways,
Churchyard at night
Steve
now, I
is
think.
my co-host from Ghost Chronicles International, in case you didn't know, which can be heard every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on TogiNet, Pararex, Planet Paranormal, and far beyond that, including Radio Crackle in UK, which I have no idea what it is.
Radio crack?
Radio, yeah, it could be. Little wisecracks on it. But anyways,
Crackle?
so Steve is a parapsychologist and a aficionado of Harry Price. And for those who don't know, Harry Price is probably the gold standard in ghost hunting back in his day. And now we have the gold standard, the Wall Street Journal's 20th century gold standard in ghost hunting, Steve Parsons. So I think the circle has come complete. So Steve, welcome to the U.S. and
Thank you
it's
again.
finally good to be able to sit down next to you when we do a show. So that's, although you put
It's
me
good
in
to be back.
between, which was a good idea. So would you call yourself a Harry Price aficionado?
Harry Price has certainly been a hero of mine since childhood. I mean, the books were, I think lots of children have grown up with the books. You know, the boy wizard under the stairs, the owl delivering them, the mail. I think,
I think that's the wrong Harry.
it isn't if you type it into eBay. Seriously, if you put Harry Price into eBay search, it comes up with all Harry Potter.
Oh my God, that's funny.
Is it on Wikipedia? So it must be true.
Must be true.
Must be.
But yeah, I've been interested in ghosts since childhood, and of course, he was one of the great ghost hunters of the 1930s and 40s, and earlier. But his books were the sort of books that I grew up reading, plus Peter Underwood and Andrew Green and others.
Peter Underwood and Andrew Green. I don't think many people in America know.
Other great British. Well, they were famous in their day at both sides of the Atlantic, but Price gained a degree of notoriety because of Borley Rectory, and because after his death there was a deal of controversy about him, that people said that he manipulated situations or that he was fraudulent.
Really?
They absolutely did.
I've heard that before.
Despite the fact that that was laid to rest, and the book that originally put the knife into Harry was seriously undermined, Mudsticks, unfortunately. So he's always referred to as a controversial figure.
I'm just curious, has anybody ever, there are a lot of mediums in the world, especially in the UK, has any of them ever attempted to contact Harry Price after his death?
They haven't set out to contact Price, but not very many years after Price died, he was reported to have come through to a number of mediums.
Wow.
What do you have to say?
Nothing substantial.
Nothing substantial.
Nothing worth reporting.
Interesting.
Now, for those who aren't really familiar with Harry Price, can we have a little bit of background on Harry?
Absolutely. He was born at a very young age and went on his first ghost hunt at age 15, where he remarkably claimed to have blown up a poltergeist.
Oh.
Price and a school friend had heard that in the village in the middle of England where they were holidaying, that there was a manor house that had a ghost, and they decided to creep into the building. They got permission to creep into the building late at night, and they sat there the first night and they heard footsteps in the empty building descending the stairs. And when the footsteps got to the bottom of the stairs, they paused and they ascended again. So the next night the boys returned, and Price, who had an inventive character, brought along a camera, and they needed some flash. So he constructed a rudimentary flash gun using flash powder and a tobacco tin, which he placed on the floor. He ran a length of bell wire under the door into the dining room where the two boys waited, and Price had his finger on the button that would activate the flash. They waited and waited, and they heard the footsteps descend the stairs. The footsteps paused. They took 2 steps up. Price pressed the trigger. They said the blinding light lit up the dining room. They both heard the footsteps distinctly stumble. When they rushed out, there was not a shred of remnant of anything, not even the flash tin. Price said in his biography that he potentially blew up the poltergeist. Price used the term poltergeist for all forms of ghosts. So, well, maybe he did. Which just sort of harks back to the Haunted Asylum episode where they blew up a ghost after capturing it. Kind of, can you kill something that's already dead?
Well, according to the Haunted Asylum people, which is what do they call the Wraith? Wraith is the name of the group. Is that it did work because by blowing it up, they dispersed the energy, because ghosts being energy can either be created or destroyed, but could be dispersed. So therefore, that was their thinking behind blowing up the ghosts after they trapped them in the devil's box, which is a box that is enclosed in mirrors, so that the ghosts would go in the box and be confused because there were mirrors everywhere. So there you go. That's the name of that tune.
All right. Wow.
So, I mean, you've been doing this for several years, Mr. Parsons.
Doing what?
Ghost
Co-hosting
investigating.
Ghost Chronicles with you.
Ghost
This is the first show I've done sober.
Ghost investigating and parapsychology, and You've written several papers and several articles for the SPR or the Ghost Club and other reputable ghost organizations or paraphysical organizations. And you're quite distinguished in the UK, so much so that the Wall Street Journal came over a couple of years ago and did a feature article, which is really interesting since it's such a Main Street magazine here, newspaper here in the U.S. So, I mean, what led you along this path to, go into that study?
I honestly don't really know. I think it's just something that's innate within all of us, an interest, a desire. People like fishing, people like aeroplanes, people like racing cars. My bag growing up was ghosts, read the books, and just developed that interest. And fortunately for me, I was able to pursue the interest into I can't really call it a career, but a full-time hobby, I think, would suffice for 35 years.
Wow.
But you had a regular job growing up. I mean, you were a nurse at that time, so I mean, you no longer do that. So you made a career change. So what was the driving force that made you change your career, which was nursing, and to go into ghost hunting?
Well, I was unable to work properly as a nurse due to an accident, which gave me the opportunity to essentially use my hobby as to be able to pursue it full time. Mm-hmm. So it was a huge advantage to be able to sort of change horses and not necessarily worry too much about the day-to-day boredom of having to work for a living. Because I now work at nights, because ghost hunters only work at nights, don't they?
So, I mean, the interesting thing about it, I mean, there are so many people in the world that are involved in this now, especially since the advent of all these television shows. And I know that, for instance, you're quite esteemed in the UK. I mean, how did you reach that position? I mean, was it a series of articles that caught the attention of other academics, or was it a pursuit of a particular case?
There are two ways that you gain recognition in this field. The first way is to get on a television series and tell everybody how great you are. And then do cons and conventions, charge people lots of money because you're a celebrity.
Well, there you go. Right.
The other way of doing it is the way that I used, which was to produce results that people find credible, to conduct research that people find to be meaningful, helpful to developing our understanding of a range of phenomena relating to ghosts and hauntings. And the recognition isn't something I set out to achieve. I set out purely to achieve an understanding for myself and for the team Parascience, which I'm a member. The recognition for the hard work that we do came from other people, and it's something that I think is the best accolade that any group or investigator could wish to receive. I mean, if we take perhaps a musical analogy, you get bands that go onto the X Factor or Britain or America's Got Talent. They have a hit single, where you have other groups that work their way through the pub and club scene, learning their craft and learning their trade.
Right.
So I went through the pub and club scene.
There you go.
I see.
Paid your dues, so to speak.
Yeah, paid my dues.
Paid your dues. Paid your dues.
And along the way, you founded this Parascience, and originally you were a member of another group. So I assume that you joined this group because of like interest with other principals in the group. But what made you go on to form Parascience, and what was its goal?
Well, back in the day when Parascience formed, Anne Winsper, the co-founder of Parascience, we both were in a local paranormal team, because at that time in the UK there were probably less than 20 groups within the entire United Kingdom. Wow. It wasn't considered to be a mainstream activity. It was considered to be very fringe activity, and if it was sort of spoken about in hushed terms. But nonetheless, we found ourselves in the same local paranormal team, and we readily recognised that what we were dealing with a situation that we deal with still today with many paranormal teams, is a group of people who wanted a spooky, scary experience and wanted to validate their own beliefs, their own ideas that they already had. I have an interest in technology and with gadgets. Nowhere near as acutely developed as yours, though, Ron. But we started to deploy equipment to support the more spiritual stuff that was being used, the Ouija boards, the table tipping. And what happened was we started to discover very quickly that we were catching the team manufacturing the results, which got us thrown out and made us very unpopular. So we decided that Anne worked in pharmacy, I'd worked in industry, in engineering, and then in nursing. We have to work to a very high degree of accuracy. We both understood the scientific principle, and so we decided that if we were going to ever satisfy ourselves, then we had to work to those standards.
Okay. So you created Parascience to work under a certain set of rules and regulations.
Yeah. The rules are simple in Parascience. It's Harry Price established a set of rules for investigators in the 1930s, and the first line of which is attend to all written and verbal instructions and carry them out to the letter. Well, that's rule 1 of Parascience. Mm-hmm. And rule 2 of Parascience, whatever Anne tells me, I tell them, and that's what happens. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And don't show any initiative.
Right. Chain of command. So I know that you spoke earlier about television shows and how a lot of people get their information from it, and you were involved, of course, in one of my favorite shows, which ran for 10 seasons or so in the UK, Most Haunted, and was over here on the Travel Channel. And so how did you get involved in that, and what was your experiences like?
Well, actually, Most Haunted's back. They've done 2 more series in the UK now, so you'll probably...
After a short hiatus?
After a short hiatus. So you'll probably be able to get it in the near future again on the US channel.
Excellent.
My involvement was one of, first of all, behind the camera, developing some of the experiments that we used on camera. And it's interesting that you bring up Most Haunted, because in actual fact, in front of camera, there were only ever 6 episodes that I was front of camera on. More than 60 documentaries I've forgotten because it wasn't in the right sort of popularist genre. Most Haunted was akin to Ghost Hunters in the USA. It was a cult television program. When the show did live episodes over, say, a 3-day Halloween special, tickets were highly sought after for the audience places. But my involvement was primarily behind the camera. Then Kieran, the parapsychologist on the show, the skeptical parapsychologist, he was relocating from the UK to France, and I'd been working with Anne, Kieran, and Yvette on the book, Kieran and Yvette's book, The Ghost Hunters. Right. And it was a case of, can you step up and cover for Kieran, which turned into Kieran and I sharing the role for the remainder of the series. I was supposed to do the next series, but by then I realised that I was happier doing what I did.
The behind the scenes stuff?
Well, the documentary stuff, the documentary rather than the performance art of ghost hunting.
Of course, Anne was on TV. She was just on the...
We saw her. We saw her.
Right. Oh, this is very exciting. I was on the Bridgewater, final cut of the Bridgewater Triangle documentary that they picked up on the Destination America. I made it past the cutting room floor, so that was exciting. But I did want to say that Most Haunted was the first, before Ghost Hunters, was the first show that I ever saw that piqued my interest in the paranormal. And it used to be on here on like Friday nights at 10 o'clock. And I would just wait all day.
Get your wine.
Get my wine. And
it was really fun to work on.
For Most Haunted. Yeah. And that's kind of what started me down this particular path.
And a lot of people in the UK...
Hence the farming of East Bridgewater's most haunted.
Right, East Bridgewater's most haunted.
Right.
Correct, yeah.
A lot of modern investigators in the UK particularly can trace their interest to Most Haunted. But now it's become fashionable, as they've established their own groups. You attend their investigations and they often start off with, well, you know, Most Haunted, we're nothing like that. That's just television. And then they do everything that Most Haunted does. They're putting like a clear blue water between themselves and the entertainment side, but then they use exactly the same techniques and methods.
Right.
There's sort of elitism, a snobbery.
So let's go back in time a little bit now and talk about Harry Price.
Okay.
We do, because we have a lot of information
Right.
that Steve sent us about Harry Price that we'd like to.
So where would you like to start, Steve?
Well, Harry has got to be... We left him blowing poltergeists up at age 15.
That's right.
Price was an engineer and a deep interest in history, but a very powerful and strong interest in magic. And he was a member of the Magic Circle, and he became fascinated in illusion and magic and mediumship because it was very popular in the years immediately after the First World War. There were lots of mediums offering to get the communication from the troops, the soldiers who had been killed during the carnage of the First World War. And organisations like the Society for Psychical Research were studying the explosion in mediumship. Price was also fascinated. He joined the Society for Psychical Research, but was a little unhappy with the results or the techniques and methods that they were using. And he set up his own in 1925, the National Laboratory for Psychical Research, which was actually on the top floor of the Spiritualist building in London, in Queen's Square, I think it was. And he worked much more closely with spiritualists, testing mediums. He became renowned as a fearsome debunker of fraudulent mediums. But, and here we can see, I think there's a picture of the NLPR.
Oh yeah, look at that. That's cool.
It was tremendously well equipped. It had seance rooms, it had a laboratory, it had an engineering workshop. It had access to all of a range of equipment that modern ghost hunters will probably recognise. And there were motion detectors, there were stereo cameras. There were things that we're not allowed to have today, like bowls of mercury and flasks of brandy, although I think the flask of brandy should make a comeback.
Oh, absolutely.
But nonetheless, Price worked hard. He debunked many, many mediums, but he also substantiated when he felt that he was dealing with a case of genuine mediumship. He would champion the medium, and he was not afraid of saying, in his opinion, he was dealing with a genuine case. Wow. And one of the most outstanding mediums that Price was involved with was Stella C, or Stella Cranshaw. This was a young London office girl whom Price met on the train going into London, and she was, I think she was reading his paper over his shoulder. And there was a mention in it of spiritualist meetings, and they got talking. Stella admitted that she had had odd moments, psychic experiences, and Price persuaded her to come into the NLPR, the National Laboratory, to be tested. And she produced some incredible results. The most famous is the Andrews liver salt result, where Stella described a vision which didn't mean anything at the time, but some weeks later it was accurately shown to have been the front cover of a newspaper. I think it was the Daily Mirror newspaper, or the Daily Mail newspaper. They contacted the paper, it was the Daily Mail, and it's the Andrews liver salt. She described the advert, the date, and other information. They spoke to the paper. Now, what was interesting is the paper there were 2 Andrews liver salt adverts. The other one, they were switched around only 24 hours beforehand, which removed any possibility of Stella or Price or anybody else knowing which advert was going to be used.
Right. Wow.
Price also invented some really cool gadgets to work with Stella. one that we tried to recreate for Spirit Quest 2014, but we gave the task to Ron, so that was doomed to fail, was the telekinetoscope. And what Price was trying to seek was, could psychic forces be measured, be observed? And he had this device rigged up whereby a button press would light a lamp. But being a little more crafty than that, he put the button under a glass dome. Being even craftier than that, beneath the glass dome and above the button was a soap bubble. So not only would the dome itself have to be removed, but any action to physically press the button would have popped the soap bubble. And the bulb did indeed light.
Wow. That's amazing.
And so, so when Price was committed to mediumship, he was more than happy to proclaim it as, in his opinion, a genuine phenomena.
Right.
But woe betide anybody who Price caught, and he did catch many psychic photographers, mediums, all manner of.
So he's very similar to Harry Houdini in his pursuit of.
Price and Houdini wrote to each other and communicated, and they were close friends and allies.
Oh, that would make sense. They were chasing the same thing, right?
Well, not necessarily. Houdini was looking for proof, and people think that Houdini was a debunker of mediums, which he used with his stage show, of course, because he realised that it was a great show. But throughout his life, Houdini remained, I suppose, ever hopeful, but a forlorn hope that he could get in touch with his mother.
Right.
And the stage act, this frustration at not finding mediums, turned inwards because he couldn't get to speak to his mother.
Right.
And the other interesting thing about it, of course, is that he was introduced to that by Arthur Conan Doyle, who was very much into the medium, the spiritualist church. And even after his death, they attempted to contact, his wife attempted to contact Harry, because he believed if anyone could come back, he could. And the last seance was held on top of the hotel in Hollywood. And it's debatable on the results of it. Like everything, you can make statistics and everything work to your advantage or against you. So, yeah, it's an interesting, Harry was an interesting character, to say the least. He was, you know, all these mediums, everybody thinks, oh, we went to town to simply, you know, pick on a medium, and then, but they were part of his show. That was part of his act, and they knew that, and they volunteered to be part of it. In fact, so you know, it's not all poor old mediums. You know, it's like okay, they knew what they were getting into.
Both Harrys actually wrote books showing how mediums produce the tricks.
Yeah.
Price, with the author Eric Dingwall, reproduced the work of, it was called Revelations of a Spirit Medium, which is incredibly difficult to get. Their own version of it, which was a direct facsimile of an extremely rare book that was produced in America in the 1890s by an American medium gone good. And he revealed all of the tricks that were common on the circuit mediums. The books were bought up and disappeared rapidly.
Amazingly.
And there were only 3 original copies known to exist. Price had 2 of them in his library. He had a huge psychical research library. And he sacrificed one of the 2 rare books in order that a facsimile could be made, which itself now is an incredibly rare book.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's amazing. We have a question. Stephen Scott couldn't be in chat tonight. And you know he had to have a question for you.
How's the beach house?
So
That was his question.
What's the pumpkin cream pie like?
Stephen Scott wanted to ask you, what impact do you feel Harry Price had on ghost hunting today? And what do you think he would think of today's modern methods and practices?
Interesting question.
That's a very good question. What impact? I think a lot of groups can like to pay lip service to the idea that they're inspired by Price. But Price did give us a set of guidelines in the instructions for for his investigators at Borley Rectory. A very short book that had blue card covers and was called The Blue Book by Price, but that wasn't actually its title. It was How to Investigate the Alleged Haunting. Right. So a lot of groups, I think, because he's a well-known character, and he will become incredibly well-known in 2015-16 because there is a television series coming out in the UK.
That'd be cool.
Very, very, very loosely based on Price. It's as accurate as they use his name.
Oh, God.
And there's also an animated film coming out that talks about the Borley story as well. So Price will become a more popular. The controversy remains because most people have never really understood or read beyond the fact that there was this really good ghost hunter called Harry Price, but he was a bit fraudulent and a bit, therefore he was controversial. What would Price think today? I would love to go back in time and ask him, because I have a feeling I know. I'm not psychic in any way. I've studied Price for years and years, and his methods, and the way he writes, the way he speaks. I think he would turn in his grave, because what he's seeing is almost no research at all, no valuable contribution. Price dedicated his entire psychical career.
So what about groups like the SPR and the Ghost Club? And
well, they're still going, but the question was about ghost hunting today.
Yeah.
The SPR doesn't do ghost hunting, and nor does the Ghost Club in an effectual way. Price spent his entire career trying to persuade and get academics to take psychical research seriously. He offered them money, he offered them access, he offered them the NLPR itself, his psychical library. He went around many universities throughout the UK and into Europe saying, we need to bestow a chair, a department of parapsychology to study these phenomena. And I think if we look at his aim, that was his aim in life, that was the mission he gave himself. And if we look at Ghost Hunters, and if we look at Ghost Adventures and Most Haunted and the others, I really think he would think that we'd failed, we'd let him down.
Oh, wow.
So in your dissertation you mentioned Borley Rectory, so why don't we talk a little bit about Borley Rectory? What is the background for it, and then first of all, Harry Price's involvement in it?
Well, the rectory was built in 1863 by the Reverend Henry Bull to house his family. It was in the remote hamlet of Borley, which is on the Essex and Suffolk border. It was remote then, and it's remote now. It had no electricity, but it had a reputation of having been built on top of a religious building, a monastery or a convent, and it had a reputation for being haunted, particularly by a spectral nun seen walking through the grounds. So often, in fact, that one of the windows to the dining room of the rectory was bricked up by the Reverend Bull to stop the nun peering in while his family was having a meal. And this was the window tax, so he bricked it up for a reason, and that was the reason that was always stated. The building did have, it wasn't Price that gave the building the name of the most haunted house in England. The name actually arrived before Price's involvement, which began in 1929.
Before you get into it, you talked about the nun, and the nun's appearance became so regular that the path through the garden became known as the Nun's Walk.
No.
No?
No.
Explain that to us then.
Well, do we go linearly or jump to the nun?
Well, go ahead.
Well, the Nun's Walk, we'll deal with the question, the Nun's Walk. The nun was seen in one particular part of the extended gardens of the rectory, where she was seen famously on July the 28th by three of the Bull sisters, the daughters of Reverend Henry. They ran in, one of them ran in, another one came out, called out to come see, come see. And they saw this figure of the nun walking a path which ran at the boundary of the garden. The figure was reported to walk on that path once or twice over the years, most recently I think in the 1960s or 70s, and it just became known as the Nun's Walk. But the nun was much more frequently seen standing at the gate, leaning on the gate, wistfully staring out into the roadway outside Borley, outside the rectory. So the Nun's Walk
into the window, evidently.
Well, the window's nowhere near the Nun's Walk either.
Why would they have bricked it up if
because the nun used to stand there and peer in through the window whilst the family were eating, according to the story.
Okay.
But Price's involvement starts in 1929 when the incumbent at the time writes to the newspaper asking for help. He wrote to the Daily Mirror newspaper and said, "This rectory in which we live is haunted, with strange things are going on. Can you put us in touch with somebody?" I think reading the letters nowadays, I think what he was after was the Society for Psychical Research. The newspaper phoned Price, who was the most famous ghost hunter in Britain. They had already sent a reporter, Victor Wall, and Wall and Price returned to the rectory a few days later, and some strange things happened. Objects were thrown, a glass shattered through the canopy. They held a séance that night, and they got the name of the Reverend Harry Bull, which was the son of he was the second incumbent after Henry, the builder. Mm-hmm. Some information was passed during the séance to two of the Bull sisters, who had also come up to join in the séance. And this was information about their brother Harry, the second incumbent, who was also by now passed, that they said was deeply personal and perfectly accurate. Price's involvement then waned a little bit over the following. It peaked at first. He began to follow the story with interest, but his assumption was that it was the wife of the incumbent was probably just being a little hysterical, and that there really wasn't a great deal that he could get involved with, although he wrote a little for some of for the paper, mm-hmm. who were quite keen on the story. So much so that unfortunately he wasn't welcomed by the Reverend Smith, who was the incumbent at the time, for blaming his wife. But Price was able to keep a watching brief on the rectory until there was a rector change, when his involvement increased again. So he maintained his interest from 29 through to his death in 1948.
Wow.
Which peaked in 1937, 38, with his rental of the property for an entire year.
Wow.
In fact, the church offered to sell him the building, but it was already a huge tourist attraction. That people would come out in charabancs, which are some motor coaches, mm-hmm. To see the ghost. But Price realised he could have bought it for £500, but he chose to rent it for the sum of £30 for the year. And he advertised in the Times newspaper for a team of investigators because Price was suffering from ill health, mm-hmm. and he had other projects that he was involved with, right. The laboratory, and there were other projects and ideas that Price was involved with. So he wanted to put an independent team into Borley, and once that year had ended, he collated the notes with assistance from some of the investigators, mm-hmm. and produced the book, The Most Haunted House in England, which was the first of two books that got to print. There was a third book that Price was writing when he had his heart attack and died in 1948.
Wow.
I'm pleased to own Price's own hand-annotated copy of the first book, which is a very cool. He did other things too. I mean, he reinvented the Xenocard, because he realised that the Xenocard, something we're all familiar with, the opening scene of Ghostbusters, the cards with the square, the circle, the squirrel, the giraffe, and the well, there's 5 symbols. Price, when a set was sent from the Rhine Institute in North Carolina, Price looked at them and he realised they were see-through. There was a problem.
That's a little problem. That's a little problem.
Yeah, the first batch of Rhine cards was a problem, so he redeveloped into a set that he could use in his own laboratory, testing mediums in a similar manner, called the telepathic cards. And these have very similar symbols. And
cards on the
he even tried to market it. The cards were made by, I think, Waddington Games, and the cards were the ones that we're seeing on screen now. They are the lab telepather version, but Price was trying to market a commercial version. So alongside the sort of psychic clairvoyance parlor game.
Wow. Now we also have a. You had sent me a video.
Yeah.
Of Harry Price. Do we want to maybe?
Yeah, it's the
play
only
that?
known footage of Price. He did the world's first radio live ghost hunt in 1936 from Kent. But we have almost nothing apart from a 10-minute newsreel of Price. Now, obviously, we can't play all 10 minutes.
Right.
But we have an extract, I think, where Price explains rather well what psychical research is.
All right. Russ, can we roll that clip, please?
What is psychical research? A popular opinion says that it means going to seances, holding hands in the dark, singing hymns, and perhaps getting in touch with your dead relatives. But in this, popular opinion is only partly correct, because it is confusing a psychical research with a spiritualism. A psychical research is a science, and is rapidly becoming an exact science. Its object is to ascertain by exact experimental methods how far the alleged phenomena of the seance room can be brought into line with normality. These phenomena, which are produced by people who claim abnormal powers and who call themselves mediums, can be divided into physical and mental. The mental includes clairvoyance, psychometry, the direct voice which spirits are supposed to produce at seances, and similar manifestations. The physical phenomena includes telekinesis, or the abnormal movement of objects without physical contact, the poltergeist phenomena you read about in connection with haunted houses, and similar manifestations. There is an idea that the study of alleged abnormal phenomena is quite modern, but that is not the case. People have been interested in psychic phenomena from the very earliest times. So you see that psychical research means a good deal of knowledge about many things. But we are progressing. Not only are we progressing, but orthodox science is taking a very keen interest in the subject. And already many universities in various parts of the world, as for instance at Leiden in Holland, Duke University in America, Johns Hopkins University in America, and more recently, a group connected with the University of London has been formed, and it is hoped that some information will be derived from our experiments. In conclusion, I do earnestly hope and trust that any of you who come across cases of hauntings, poltergeists, unusual happenings of any sort will communicate with me, care of the Movietone News.
Wow.
Wow.
That was cool.
That was pretty cool. A little choppy, but
Yeah, I actually have a little piece of him when he was working with the Firewalker what the heck is his name, Kabuto or something or other.
Kuda Bucks.
Yeah, but that was kind of cool.
Firewalker?
Yeah, you know, Walking on Fire.
Yes.
It's all really common. We do it as a Sunday afternoon charity fundraising now, but back in the 30s, firewalking was considered to be a mystical pursuit,
Oh, I see.
like burning witches.
Like burning witches. Let's go burn some witches.
You know,
Burn some
we
witches.
talked about Borley Rectory, but we never talked about the full story of Borley Rectory. We kind of fluffed over it a little bit with just the nun and so forth. But there were a whole series of things going on, the writing, the prediction of the burning of the rectory. I mean, it's a fascinating story in itself. And I know we are running out of time right now, so can you give us a quick synopsis of what was going on?
You want me to do Borley in, what, 2 minutes? Big building, very old, haunted, burnt down, stayed haunted, still haunted, church over the road, still haunted. In fact, the ghost seems to have moved across the road. But it's a building that continues, it's a location that continues to draw investigators to the point where every 28th of July, people come to the village en masse in the hope of seeing the nun. It's become a place of pilgrimage, a mecca for ghost hunters. Any ghost hunter, there are Facebook pages dedicated to it where people write down their experiences, which are ongoing daily. You know, people put new pictures, people put new experiences, but it's all moved over the road because the rectory did burn down in 1939, was finally pulled down in 1945. The haunting moved over the road in its and has changed as well. We now have a more modern type of haunting.
So if somebody really wanted to learn about Borley, what book would you recommend? Well, since we don't have time to cover it right now.
Well, the two greatest books have to be Price's own, The Most Haunted House in England by Harry Price and The End of Borley Rectory. But a Google search will, in fact, there's a Harry Price, I think it's harryprice.com, which has the book in a readable format. Price produced very many more books.
Very good, thank you. So speaking of books, we also have your own book out now, which is called Paracoustics. So what is the premise of this book, and how can people get copies of it?
Well, it's available on Amazon,
Over here?
everywhere in the world. So if you're watching in Japan, India, America, the UK. It's a book idea that I had a number of years ago, because my area of research interest is in the way that sound interacts with people in a paranormal context. And there are lots of other, my area is infrasound, but there are lots of other people, Cal Cooper, who co-edited it with me, his work on telephone calls from the dead is sound. There are others who look at shamanism, who look at voices within seances, the knocks, the raps, the bangs that happen in hauntings and seances. So we wanted to put together I think the first attempt at doing a definitive work, and a cool cover.
Cool cover.
And a cool cover.
Definitely. I love you. He's got a little, it may be hard to see on the television, but it's a cool little ghost with headphones on. Very creative. So, now, did you draw that?
I didn't draw the ghost. The cover design is entirely mine, and the next book that follows it, Ghostology, which is due out in 4 or 5 weeks' time,
Nice.
has almost an identical cover, but the ghost has lost his headphones, and the background changes colour.
Great.
Well, you have
That
5
is
seconds
awesome.
to sell a book on a shelf, don't you?
That's true.
You know,
It's got to catch your eye.
and if you see that in amongst a load of ghost books on a shelf, you're going to think it's in the wrong place.
Right.
It's
Right.
pure
That's-
marketing
that's
and
good.
fun.
Well, I
There's
love
also
it.
humour
I
in
love
it.
it.
We have to, I think it's got to be, even in a reference work, I think you have to put something of yourself into it.
Absolutely.
And there's something of us is on the back cover. But nobody's ever spotted it yet.
The little cord, the little microphone cord?
No. The most famous psychic medium in the world, Daniel Douglas Hume, who was famous for levitating out of a London window 70 feet above the ground, floating around and floating back in again.
Oh.
And we were trying to find some quotes for the back cover So we had a quote from Daniel Hughes, and it says it's an uplifting read.
Oh my God, that's awesome. Well, we do need to, we're just about done, so we need to wrap it up.
Okay.
And we want to thank Steve
It's been a pleasure.
for coming back. Steve was our very first guest
That's right.
on our maiden voyage of Ghost Chronicles Next Generation live video broadcast.
Or I nearly wrecked the set.
And he almost wrecked the set. No, it was fine.
Don't we
But,
get like the confetti coming down in the balloons?
I know,
coming
we
up?
should have confetti, but you know, if we hadn't missed a show over the summer, tonight would have been our anniversary show. So we missed it by one, but
Say nothing.
thank
Really?
you, Steve, so much
It's been an
for
absolute pleasure.
blessing us again and gracing us with your presence. And
Being sober.
and sober, and being sober. We appreciate that as well. So until next time,
Good night.
I
God
think
bless.
we need to say good night. Thanks for listening, and see you again next time.
From ghoulies to ghosties, long-leggedy beasties, and things that go bump in the night. Deliver us, good Lord.